Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York. So, you know those slapstick comedies where the thief shoves an item under his shirt and it's so obvious and so conspicuous that the scene isn't really about a robbery. It's really just to illustrate how stupid the thief is and how obvious the thieving part of the plot is? Well, that's about where we are with Donald Trump's attempt to get Republicans in Congress to steal from the American people to fund Donald Trump's gold-gilded ballroom. Tucked inside a $72 billion with the B package filled with other politically toxic items, like $38 billion for ICE. ICE, of course, the agency viewed favorably by just 30% of the American people, and containing none of the reform measures that Democrats have demanded after the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. So tucked inside of that is a $1 billion lump sum for Donald Trump's ballroom. It is listed under, quote, security adjustments and upgrades. The Republican chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, says in a statement that the funds are for security only and they cannot be spent on, quote, non-security elements. But that $1 billion still goes towards something that the American people never asked for and don't want. And spending $1 billion of taxpayer money, of your money, on anything related to Donald Trump's gold ballroom would be a complete flip-flop, a 180-degree reversal from what Donald Trump promised.
The ballroom for the White House is the thing that you people have really, really been very generous with. These are all private individuals that put up a lot of money to build the ballroom. Not one penny is being used from the federal government. We're giving them, myself and donors are giving them free of charge for nothing. So we did this no charge to the taxpayer whatsoever. We have no taxpayer putting up 10 cents. I'm giving with donors $400 million to build a ballroom. And there's the knockout panel right here.
So not 10 cents, not a dollar, just $1 billion. A poll released last week shows that just 25% of all Americans support the White House ballroom at all. But when that poll asked who should pay for Donald Trump's gold ballroom, 9% of the respondents said that the money should be appropriated by Congress. Ask voters, and they will tell you that in a time of great economic distress, a gold ballroom is the last thing that the President of the United States of America should be spending his time on. Here's what some Florida residents told our colleague Alex Tabbitt last week.
Meanwhile, we're hearing President Trump insist that he needs a ballroom connected to the White House. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, I think it's probably money that could be used elsewhere. You know what I'm saying? With the way the economy is, and people are starving. You know. Medication.
There's a lot of things we need to work on before we're doing a ballroom reconstruction, so I think it's a little ridiculous to me.
I think he's selfish. I think he wants something to be in his name, but I think, like she said, there's so much going on right now. I think that's the last thing that we should be worrying about.
He shouldn't be doing it. He should be focusing on lowering these prices that he jacked up, because it wasn't this high before he became president. Man, gas was $3-something. Barely $3. Now it's $4. You know, it's. He don't need to be talking about ballrooms, man. You need to be trying to fix the economy.
So, how disconnected are they? Well, as Republicans plot to stick taxpayers with a $1 billion bill for the gold ballroom, Americans are right now, week after week, feeling more and more squeezed at the gas pump because of Donald Trump's war with Iran. Prices at the pump continue to soar, inflicting pain on Americans in every corner of our country. The average price for a gallon of gas is now $4.48, according to AAA. That $4.48 is up 30 cents from last week. Donald Trump stiffing the American taxpayer amid widespread anger and fury over his failure to address their economic concerns is where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Managing editor of The Bulwark and contributor Sam Stein is here. Also joining us, former Battleground States Director for the Harris-Walz campaign and Democratic strategist Dan Kennanen is back. And with me at the table, Democratic strategist and Columbia University professor, political analyst Basil Smikle is here. Sam, how did this $1 billion end up in the bill in the first place?
Well, so there is a reconciliation bill that congressional Republicans are pushing now. And for people who don't want to get too in the weeds, a reconciliation bill is a budgetary matter that can pass just with a party line vote. So you can stuff any budgetary matter into it and you can pass it with 50 Republicans in the Senate. So it becomes a grab bag. Last night, the Senate Judiciary Republicans put forth their portion of that bill. And it included tens of billions of dollars for ICE, for Customs and Border Patrol. And then tucked in there was this $1 billion expenditure. It was put in a bunch of legalese terms, but basically it's for security for the ballroom. And to your point, this was never as advertised. It wasn't that Donald Trump went up there and said, hey, we're going to have this ballroom. It's going to be paid for. And oh, by the way, the security components of the ballroom, that you're going to have to cover from taxpayer funds. He never said that. He said it was going to be fully paid for by private donations or money from his own pocket. It started at $200 million, went to $300 million, went to $400 million. At one point, Lindsey Graham, you might recall, introduced legislation that would have had Congress appropriate funds for about $400 million. Now it's $1 billion on top of whatever it costs to construct the ballroom itself. That will be paid for by taxpayer funds. I will just add one quick note. Part of the reconciliation process allows members of the opposing party to call votes to strip out various components of the bill. And so Democrats will have the opportunity to say, hey, we're going to have an up and down vote on this $1 billion specifically. And that will put every Republican on the record as voting for or against funding the ballroom at a price tag of $1 billion.
Who's running the White House in terms of guarding against barreling 100 miles an hour toward that for which 9% of the public support, Sam?
That's a great question. And I was talking about this with some colleagues. I think what's happening here, and I have no insight reporting on it, but I think what's happening here is that Donald Trump, especially in the second term, is not getting any conflicting information into his ecosystem. He's surrounded by people in the cabinet who are largely sycophantic. You see it all the time when they have these cabinet meetings and they praise him as if he's the second coming. He probably watches only news media that affirms his priors. And when he does, he'll lash out on Truth Social. So you see it every now and then when he posts something going after a random cable commentator. But by and large, I think he just gets people who tell him how great he is. And then that kind of supplements into him pursuing policies that are really vanity projects. So the ballroom is the biggest personification of this, right? $1 billion. He thinks, whatever, it's great. We'll have events here. We don't have to do the White House Correspondents' Dinner at the Washington Hilton. But it's also the reflecting pool and the golf courses at East Potomac and this arch. And it raises the question, why is he doing all of this, right? Is it vanity? Probably a lot of it is. But what is the point of building all this type of stuff if you're just going to end up leaving Washington, D.C.? Is it a legacy matter, or is it something larger than that we're not really accurately describing?
I mean, I guess what I would push back and say, Dan, is that every time the press tries to figure out what sophisticated secret version of 3D chess Trump is playing, he's just doing some dumb shit on his phone. So I want to guard against the opaque mystery. It is likely, I mean, we see from the way he tweets that he reaches for his phone and posts all night. If any of our children did that, they'd lose their phone for a semester or 7. I want to ask you, though, your theory about the people around Donald Trump. I mean, I went back and looked at the New York Times. He first talked about indicting Jim Comey in 2017, and based on New York Times reporting, Don McGahn stopped it. He wanted to indict Comey while Sessions was Attorney General. He still wanted to indict him when Bill Barr took over. There was an intermediate guy. He wanted to indict him while he was there. He wanted to indict him while Pam Bondi was there. The variable in terms of the bad, unpopular behavior that the American people don't support isn't actually Donald Trump. A lot of this is the same stuff he wanted to do the whole time. It's the weakness, the fecklessness of the people around him. And I wonder what you think that says about Susie Wiles and Todd Blanche.
Well, I wish I could say it was a surprise, Nicolle, but you may recall, the campaign in 2024, we talked about this all the time, that in 2016 to 2020, there were some serious people around Donald Trump, General Kelly and others, who could curtail his worst impulses. And they were all excommunicated one by one, largely through the events of January 6th and beyond. And you're left with kind of the My Pillow guy caucus around him. And I think that Susie Wiles is someone who's just trying to keep the trains running on time in the building, as difficult as that looks like it is for her. I was told by some Republican sources, from other appearances on networks where there are some former Trump folks that go on a lot, that, the deal with her was basically let Trump be Trump and not try to get in the way of his decision making. And on the messaging, I'll just say, the 3D chess piece of this, sometimes people want to say he's a great messenger or the worst messenger. I just think he's a prolific messenger. He says things that can cut through, and sometimes to his benefit. Build the wall was the way to describe that he'd be tough on immigration. No tax on tips was a way to describe very easily that he could connect with working class Americans on costs. And unfortunately for him, I think build the ballroom is the way to describe how selfish he is and how unfocused he is on your core economic needs at a time of incredible economic uncertainty. And the entire landscape of tariffs and the war and the gas prices and the ACA cost spikes are all his to own, and that will make the atmosphere. But this singular issue, which is so easy to understand, will be the thing that drives that straight to swing voters' mindsets and hopefully to the polls in the fall.
I mean, would you advise people I joke that I thought everybody should put that picture. Can we put that picture back up of Trump with this little crumpled dollhouse photo of the, there we go. I think everyone should make that their photo on whatever people are still on. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but I don't know. Is there a photo on Blue Sky like that? Like, this is who he is. Like, doesn't give a hoot about your economic despair, couldn't care less and has no clue how much eggs cost or anything else, is angry at you for caring about the price of gas, is angry at you for caring about losing your health care, is angry at Marjorie Taylor Greene for caring about the promise about no forever wars, is angry at Tucker Carlson for calling BS on him betraying his voters on all of the above. But what he cares about enough to carry it around in his pocket, and we've really never seen him produce a picture of any of his children or wife for that matter, but he carries this around everywhere he goes. Is that something that you think Democrats should argue in the midterms?
Yeah, look, I think it's his singular focus, and it's evident it's his singular focus. He could call a meeting any day of the week on health care. I mean, let's not forget there was a whole shutdown for weeks, months, talking about this hike for 20 million Americans of $1,000 or more a month. Now we're talking about gas prices that are $2 a gallon more than they were before. And Nicolle, it's $1 billion for the ballroom. But think about this fiscal reality that before the Iran war, the price of gas, to now, the increase there accounts for $1 billion a day from consumers. So every day consumers are paying for another one of these hypothetical ballrooms. But to your point, it's not about the dollars, it's about his focus, and it's not on you. In fact, to your point, he's angry that voters want to pull him away from this pet project, and he has loathing for them. I think that comes through at this point.
Let me show all of you what Sarah Longwell, the publisher of The Bulwark, Sam's colleague, my guest on this week's episode of The Best People, said about why this behavior, because to the point about wanting to indict Comey as early as 2017, Trump has largely been the same figure with, to everyone's point, different guardrails around him over the last 10 years. Here's Sarah's articulation of why it's hurting him politically now.
When you get a poll, it's like, okay, I see people care about the economy. That's the top. The focus groups allow you to hear people say, it makes me want to cry. Like, it is causing me pain. I have to choose between whether I can get groceries or whether I pay for my kids to be able to participate on the soccer team. Last year, you would say this to me, right? We would be on the show and like, are people upset yet? Are people, and like, they were like, well, he's not fixing things, but Rome wasn't built in a day. We have patience, give him some time. That is not how they sound now. Now they sound like, what is he doing with Iran? What is he doing with the ballroom? Why is he focused on all this other stuff? Nothing's getting better for me.
I mean, tragically, things aren't going to get better anytime soon.
Well, to Sarah's point, there's a sort of invisible infrastructure that really strengthens families and family functions, that aside from the headlines with gas prices and prices of eggs, that families are really concerned about right now. For example, the cost of childcare. And the fact that the president, through his very specific policies, has decreased the amount of childcare affordable and available to families. We're looking also at the cost of engaging and dealing with children and adults who are disabled. He cut those programs. If you're a parent right now trying to send your kid off to college, all those changes in student loans and all of the opportunities that kids once had to get scholarships and fellowships, a lot of that's gone away. So this kind of shadow tax that families have to endure, right? That's not just gas prices, it's not just food prices, but it's all the things that help families function. All of that is being sacrificed to build this monument to excess and capriciousness that the president just wants everybody to love and like. But to Dan's earlier point, it really is just about his selfishness.
I mean, Sam, what is the legal status? Like, do they have, anyone that's renovated in their own home, like, do they have all the deliveries from Home Depot or wherever the stuff's coming from? Like, are they ready to build and just waiting for the taxpayers to foot the bill? Like what is standing where the regal East Wing once was?
Well, first of all, I'd be remiss not to say that Sarah Longwell, wow, what insight, what brilliance, incredible stuff. You should have her on all the time. An amazing colleague. Secondly, I will say, in terms of the legal status, there's been challenges to this because they did not follow proper procedure. You're supposed to get clearance for this, environmental reviews. Congress is supposed to have some appropriations of funds. And I'll get back to it in a second. As things stand now, they've demolished the East Wing, and it's just sort of like a big gaping hole. And this has affected a lot of different projects around D.C. So I mentioned the East Potomac Golf renovation. There was a report over the weekend that they were just going to go ahead and renovate the courses. And the National Links, which is fighting them, which has control of the courses now, went to court to get an injunction to say, you cannot do this. And the judge in that case specifically referenced what is happening in the East Wing to basically say, you can't touch anything more than 10 trees. The judge said, you can't do what you did in the ballroom, which is, bulldoze everything and then decide, we'll wait for the actual court hearing after the fact. So this has affected how judges are thinking about this stuff around the city. Now, with respect to the reconciliation bill, this is why this is somewhat important, which is because Congress, through this reconciliation bill, has decided that it is going to appropriate $1 billion for some portion of the ballroom, whether it's security or otherwise. The White House is now pointing to that and saying, look, we're getting congressional authorization for the construction. Congress is going to sign off on this thing. So there is a legal component that matters to this reconciliation bill with respect to how they go forward with the ballroom construction.
It's amazing. At a time when 15% of Americans think the economy is getting better, the Republicans are marching in lockstep with something that has 9% support from the public. It's remarkable. Everyone sticks around. When we come back, if affordability is one massive pressure and pain point squeezing Republicans ahead of these midterms, the other one is the Jeffrey Epstein cover-up. How ties to the disgraced sex offender are leading the attacks in one closely watched Senate race in Ohio. I'll show it to you. Plus, while the Republicans flail and struggle to hang on politically ahead of November, they're getting no help from Donald Trump, who has decided to shift his energy even further to his renewed attacks on the Pope, the very popular Pope Leo. And later in the show, he's still at it. Trump can't. A scathing attack from a well-known and highly respected Democratic candidate for Senate shows how the Democratic Party is embracing the anger that all voters, including Republican voters, feel over the perceived and actual cover-up of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Ahead of today's primary in Ohio and the election in November, central to determining which party controls the Senate next year, the Democratic candidate, former Senator Sherrod Brown, put out this ad attempting to tie incumbent Republican Senator John Husted to Jeffrey Epstein. Watch.
Of all 535 members of Congress, who's taken the most money from associates of Jeffrey Epstein? John Husted, that's who. In fact, Husted's taken over $116,000 from one of Epstein's closest friends and co-conspirators, and last year took a maximum donation from him just weeks before voting to block the release of the Epstein files. John Husted, who's he really working for?
I'm sure Brown and I approve this message.
We're back with Sam, Dan, and Basil. Dan, this feeling that they are protecting a class of people, of elites, of high-profile Democrats. I mean, I think it was the former general counsel and former President Obama's general counsel's office who was fired from her big job at Goldman Sachs for her email correspondence with Epstein, prominent Democratic fundraiser Brad Karp, who ran Paul Weiss for many years, lost his job atop that law firm. I mean, it is not a partisan argument, and Sherrod Brown feels like the perfect messenger for this political attack. What do you think?
Oh, I really agree. And I think your point about it not being partisan is the best context to put this kind of conversation in. We like to sometimes have this right-left question about the middle, and we think of swing voters and folks in the middle as the center of the electorate, and the question being, are we left or are we right as we run campaigns? But increasingly so, it really is top and bottom that's driving politics. I think Trump actually understood that pretty well in 2024, and I've often critiqued our own campaign. I think when we went to, the Wall Street Journal to sell an economic plan, rather than sort of pulling us to right of center for swing voters, that just pulled us up to be more elite, and Trump was going to McDonald's. But in this instance, it is that protecting that elite class. It's corruption. It's protecting their interests over yours. And then put that in the context of not just the U.S. economy, but the global economy, where wealth consolidation at the top is happening year over year over year. And even when people are making more money than they ever have in their lives sometimes, they're further behind because costs are rising so much more quickly. And there's many folks who aren't making any money or out of jobs because we basically had zero employment growth since Trump has come back into office. So I think this top versus bottom frame, which is the corrupt elite being protected by Trump and folks like Husted and others, is a really powerful frame to prosecute this election.
Let me show you someone else who I think is doing it really effectively. This is John Ossoff.
Now, you remember we were told that MAGA was for working class Americans. You remember that? But this is a government of, by, and for the ultra-rich. It is the wealthiest cabinet ever. This is the Epstein class ruling our country. They are the elites they pretend to hate.
This was an effective speech, and that was one of the biggest applause lines. What are you counseling and what are you hearing on the ground from candidates and campaigns ahead of the midterms?
Well, I just think that kind of attack is really powerful right now. And I think in 2026, Nicolle, there are many voters who will simply reject this version of the Republican Party and Trump. And I think Democrats have a very good chance of winning back the House, if not the Senate, because of that. But the question for me as a strategist is, can you not just, win over the places where Trump has lost support, Republicans have lost support, but can we win over those voters? Latino voters in particular, I look at Passaic County, New Jersey, where it swung 17 points from Biden to Trump in 24, and then 17 points back to Mikey Sherrill in 2025. That's a 43% working class Latino county that votes on costs and doesn't like the corruption, doesn't like any of this stuff. But they're not our voters. We have to earn them. And to me, the difference between a win and a wave will be, can Democrats convince those voters we are really with you and not just lip service, really with you on lowering costs and making life more affordable and better right now.
There's some polling about young voters, which I know is always where your head and heart are. 81% are unhappy with the way things are going.
They are. And, to Dan's point, and this is why I think this is a great opportunity for Democrats, but it's not a slam dunk. And you want to make sure that, yes, I think banging away on Epstein is important, but you want to make sure that you frame it, to Dan's point, as sort of top versus bottom. And Sherrod Brown overperformed in 2024, so he's so there is
he lost by 3 points.
3 points.
Yeah.
So there is a really good shot for him. But this is where I think there is a lot of conversation among Democrats, right? Do you run as the anti-Trumper, or do you actually start to offer something to the electorate? Because the one thing that I do hear a lot from voters is, where is the Democratic Project 2026? Where is the alternative? And especially when you have real fear around voter suppression, the result of the Supreme Court decision on the Voting Rights Act. The question is, what are Democrats doing to protect us and to fight for us? Which is one thing that Republicans, even if you even a Republican, you didn't feel that Donald Trump was a great policy person. You felt that he was fighting for you, and they're wrong, but you felt that he was fighting for you. And I think Democrats want to feel that someone's fighting for them. So there's an economic populism that may work here, but you have to zoom out a bit and not just get bogged down in the sort of very specific Epstein issues. But I do think that with respect to young people in particular, they want to hear that. They want to hear that kind of what's the plan, and the economic populism works for them as well, even if it's not attached to the party brand, which is something the institutionalists probably don't want to hear right now.
Yeah. Sam, what is your latest reporting on how the Senate is looking for Democrats?
Oh, much better. My colleague Lauren Egan has been talking to strategists nonstop about this. I mean, 6 months ago, it was sort of a pipe dream that they could win the seats needed to get there. But increasingly, the operatives in the party are emboldened by what they see, not just in the polling data, but if you look at the fundraising data, the candidates who are on the ballot, Senate candidates, are raising insane amounts of money from a huge influx of small dollar donors, which is a real indication of enthusiasm, right?
Yeah.
And it's in states that, maybe would have seemed unlikely not so long ago. Ohio is one of them, obviously.
Right.
Texas increasingly, Alaska, Iowa. And so, look, they have to win 4 seats. It's challenging. It's not impossible. And even with 4, you have to contend with the fact that John Fetterman is a live wire act continuously for the party. But it's not impossible at this point in time. And in fact, the betting markets seem to treat it as a likelihood at this juncture. Let me just add one thing about the Epstein class, because I do think this relates not just to this conversation about the Senate, but also to our prior conversation about the ballroom, which is that the contrast Democrats are really putting together, which I think is effective, is not just that it's, up or down, it's that there's a corruption here happening, that the administration is covering things up, that they are enriching themselves, that the Trump family is getting rich through all these ventures, these crypto schemes and these contracts. And the only one that's really benefiting from this presidency are the family members and the family members of the cabinet members. And that's the Epstein class. And that's why this holistic charge works. As to Basil's point, it would be beneficial probably for Democrats to put together some sort of policy platform that could take their congressional approval higher and make voters more excited about the prospects of them taking over. But it does come with a real risk, and I think it's important to talk about that, which is you want this election to be about Donald Trump. You want this election to be about whether the Epstein class, quote unquote, is in charge. And if you put out a platform like that, you do change the conversation. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but we all can remember when Rick Scott, for instance, did this in the last midterm cycle. It gave Democrats a lot of fodder to go out and say, hey, they're going to try to cut your Social Security. So there are real risks.
It's so interesting that you mentioned corruption. I mean, I think one of the things that gets lost from the surprise, the turnout results of the Orban race is that, yes, he was talking about economic issues, and yes, they participated, and at 71%, it was too big to deny. But they also ran against his corruption. And one of the first things that they announced after the election was actually an investigation into CPAC in this country. So how Hungarian taxpayers' money ended up in the coffers of CPAC. So it is interesting how all those things are starting to connect. Sam Stein, we should also point out that your glowing comments about Sarah Longwell, I agree with them, but she also happens to be your boss, so I'll make sure she saw those. Dan Kennan, it's great to have you back. Basil, it's always great to start off with you. Thank you all so much. After the break for us, Donald Trump is still fighting with the Pope, and that is not a headline in The Onion. He's accusing the Pope of, quote, endangering Catholics. Another bat bleep crazy story to tell you about. Don't go anywhere.
शिकारा संबरी जीरी मुरी दा संगते बेलिरिंद पुटरे पल्ला मनाजीर साई बिलदता सड़दार संगता साई रोशे पका होए खावे बेली मड़ बेसवी मड़ दे देने जी एदा बोर बारगे सिंगार तगा बेली दे मखनो धीरे दे हाजी साई से भी है बर केवला हाजी शिकारा गढ़तगो बेली राजा के मार तुन्ना जादानी साई मीरचा करो सड़दार मनी साई आफा मथा डोला बरो बेली गोश्ता मुरी दे फुल गोदानी साई मीरचा करो सड़दार मनी एदा मंगो थई मंगारवा साई तक गुड़ दे हानिया बरानी एदा हानी मलूक जानी दगे माझी मता से देख दे एदा आफे कथा इर्गिश्ता गांजी साई बूचो खुदो आपदा गांजी बेली आफ मलू का वार्तगा आफ आफ दिलार जीवार्तगा एदा गिंद वदी बेअकुला आपके मुरीदा वार्तगा साई को करतगो आप कष्टगा जी
सर्वाने मजा शाहे शाहे दस्त तीर दाना जरा जल्दी जल्दी तीन आँखों के तल मले टेके टेके शपुरंगाज मोर वदरे होशे होशे गड़तगा मले सा जले रंदानी जीवात है
Mezgure makho jam se hak syade Hidhal wal gitto hal vadi date Margo hal che rava date Alama kula her mer bita कब तक वो कारी है सदो माहे लाल सदो बच्ची दो रखा बीमार जीवात दिलमनी सुहाजे झवे नोखे ढडर आवी तो जगर स्याहे दकुड़ी यानो सोख्तगा पानाद आसदा चोटिया खड़ो बीता मेहड़ा यलट्टे खाना पीरई गोरमा सगिस गोख पीरई जीवाते मुलिद आजुए खुदे केस्तान मनदा जाने हर शशे हत्यार जान गोतेगा चौटवी काटार मलगो मोची रखगे संजा काटुश खैराता न हो से तायरा इकुले दरगाह कबूल बिया मावरी दोसा सर जो मांगे